you do have to defend your time from people who are taking it from you. You do have to decide how much time you're going to spend with certain people and see if the time that you're spending with them is aligning with the goals that you have. If you have and you are capable, you can help someone next to you. And if more people have and are capable, they can help more people. And
100%.
That's what society is supposed to be about. That's why we gather in communities. Well, welcome to the Positive Network podcast. I'm your host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Andrew.
Today, we're going to be talking about an exciting topic. We are going to be chatting about sovereign defense. This is the 8th point in the Sovereign Life Operating System. So sovereign defense it's a sneaky but important thing because it's one of those ones that permeates through all the points of the Sovereign Life OS. Sovereign defense is something that you have to be aware of in many categories. Like, it applies to the defense of your children and their well-being. It applies to defending your time so it's not stolen from you. It applies to defending your money so that it's not lost, taken away, or, eaten up by inflation. It applies to almost every one of these principles, especially our last episode. If you tuned in for sovereign data, you have to defend your data and the data points you're putting out there in the world. So maybe, Andrew, you can give us a definition of defense, and then we can go a little bit deeper into it when it comes to becoming a sovereign citizen.
Yeah, for sure, Mike. My definition of defense used to be like, hey, it was just like, how can you stop someone from, killing you in your house or something like that? And like, that was the first thing that came to mind, but it's evolved dramatically since I was a kid.
Okay.
Now I see it more as that defense is your ability to resist someone else's from imposing their will upon your own free will.
Right.
In a way that basically harms or manipulates you against your own best self-interests.
Right.
Now, as you were saying, this can take a lot of different forms. It isn't just physical. Like someone, yes, they can threaten you physically, but they can also threaten you in other ways. They could manipulate you through your mind. They can steal your data. They can hurt your kids. They can take away your food. There's so many different possible attack vectors. Right. And so sovereign defense is, at this stage, because it sort of culminates in all the previous points we've talked about, right? Yes. And where it touches on all of them. But I think a big caveat is some people think like, I'm not going to do that because it's too crazy. People get too crazy. And that is exactly true. Because you can't defend yourself against everything. No, just like in computers, you can't defend yourself against every possible hack.
Yeah.
So if you're like, I'm going to figure out how I'm going to defend myself against a freaking meteor, like, no.
Good luck.
Like, you could go that extreme if you want to try, but the point is that I'm trying to make is that you have to look at what's a reasonable defense within your bounds of capacity, what you can actually do, what's reasonable to happen.
Your personal circumstances.
Exactly.
Like, do you live on the edge of a hill that it's, there's avalanche season happening every year? That's a different set of circumstances than someone who lives in
like the prairies or something.
The prairies, or
you're like, gotta defend myself against the avalanches,
right? Or where there's somewhere where there's hurricanes all the time. So your specific circumstances will dictate what the highest priority of defense is for you to lay down. So
yeah, and also the capacity of what you might have, right? Like if you don't have that many resources or knowledge on certain things, you're going to be less able to defend yourself. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try.
Yep.
But what you want to do is figure out like what are the most likely scenarios to play out, and none of them will actually be likely, right? But the point is like you cover the base, like maybe the top 10 or 20 most likely scenarios.
Yep.
And then, you evaluate if that's where you kind of stop or do you keep going a little bit. But it is a slippery slope. And I think that's what gets people to be like, I don't even want to go there at all.
Yeah, I don't want to think negatively. Well, remember we're on the positive podcast, but you have to think about adverse situations so that you can stay in a state of positivity. And this is a great kind of segue into talking about what the sovereign life operating system does. If you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you think about on the bottom where it's like food, water, shelter, and you go up a level, it's relationships. So there's all these things in that pyramid. And when you defend your food, when you defend your water, when you defend your home, it's a level of mental security. It's a level of relaxation that can come over you, like knowing that you've got yourself covered, the defense of the things that are important to you, defending your family from intruders, from fire, these things, the mental clarity, the mental freedom you will get subconsciously, because this is built into us at a deep rooted core. There's part of our brain that is still looking over our shoulder, trying to see where that saber-toothed tiger is.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
and if you're listening to this and you live in a first world country, there's not a lot of crazy threats out there right now at that, at that level, like depending on your circumstances. It's very, very toned down to what our brain was built for back in the days of extreme survival.
That's
but your
right.
brain is still looking for what's going to take you out. So if you cover these things, if you build defense plans, and you might not even be thinking of them as defense plans, it's going to change your whole psychology and allow you to work on the next levels of protecting your family and your community.
That's a really good point. It's almost, I think, to build on that point, it's almost like when you have a bunch of stuff in your head and you write it down so it doesn't take up mental space anymore.
Yes.
If you can have these plans and have these strategies set up and basically taken care of, that offloads your brain, because your brain is still always going to be in that mode, right? Saber-toothed tiger mode. What are the threats?
Yes.
And if you don't do anything against them, even if you're like, oh, that'll never happen, in the back of your brain, you're still going to be thinking that.
Yes. So on this episode, we're going to go through 3 practical things again that you can do. But ahead of that, let's review the Sovereign Life operating system again. So this consists of 12 points. The first 8 are points that you can act on to actualize the 9th point. So the first one is sovereign time. So in regards to this, protecting and defending your sovereign time. The second one is sovereign food. Do you have a small food supply? We'll talk a little bit about that. Sovereign mind, protecting your mind from assaults, influences, persuasion, people making you do things against your will. Sovereign body, protecting your body. Do you have a healthy body? Are you protecting it from contaminants, from chemicals coming in through products into your home? We've talked about this on a previous episode.
And saber-toothed tigers.
And those damn saber-toothed tigers.
That don't exist anymore.
They're going to get you. We did have a bear in the yard last night that I...
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I hit him with a boot trying to get him out of the yard, but he just kind of looked at me and wandered off. So
okay,
it wasn't that impressive.
Well, I'm glad you survived that.
So
your sovereign body is okay.
My sovereign body is still intact.
Nice.
After body would be sovereign money, protecting your money, defending your money. And then after that would be sovereign children. I mean,
That's a big one.
We've talked about that extensively on previous podcasts. Sovereign relationships, protecting your relationships, right? That can form a number of things. And then sovereign data, our last episode. And then today we're here on sovereign defense. Now, these first 8 points culminate in the 9, helping you to become your own sovereign citizen. And sovereign citizen, we're not talking about straw man sovereign individuals who, I'm not part of the law. We're talking about you building yourself up into a self-sufficient, critical thinking, sovereign citizen. And whatever that definition is, it's going to be your own definition through the points that we teach within this group and community.
Yeah, the way I see it is being like less dependent and less weak on people helps you to help people out. It's not about like going off into the bush and eating a can of beans in a cave. That's not going to help anything. But what will actually help the world is if all of us are stronger, we can all help each other and we can all make a better world together.
If you have and you are capable, you can help someone next to you. And if more people have and are capable, they can help more people. And
100%.
That's what society is supposed to be about. That's why we gather in communities.
Exactly.
And we have to get back to that. So if we create a whole bunch of sovereign citizens who are, again, critical thinking, self-sufficient people, we can start to reshape forms of governance. And we can actually get what we want out of the elected leaders and officials that we put in power. And when we do that, we have the opportunity to create sovereign nations, rebuild our nations from the ground up in the way that they got here in the first place, right? Bringing back, merging new skills, new technologies with age-old ways of thinking and doing stuff, resiliency, critical thinking.
Yeah.
So those are the 12 points just in summary again. So maybe there's a couple of these we just want to touch on and ignite some thoughts for the listeners. Like, I'd love to hear you guys in the comments first on the Sovereign Life operating system. And did you have a different definition of what a sovereign citizen was before you heard that? Or did you have no idea what it was and maybe this clicked for you? comment below, put some questions into the chat. We'd love to hear from you, because this process is a new paradigm of thought, yet it seems like it's an old one. It's ancient. It's built into us.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, comment below. Andrew, maybe there's a couple points we want to get into with regards to sovereign defense. What stands out for you when it comes to the first 8 points?
Yeah, I mean, you could touch on all of them like you just did. I'll just go through kind of like some ones that really come to mind. One is, we've all thought of, oh, there's an intruder in my house. What am I going to do?
Right.
I don't know if you've had the experience, but I've definitely had the experience where I thought someone was breaking into my house, and, you get that like panic and you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Right. And like, it's nice you can call 911, but what happens in the time between when you make the phone call and when they actually get there, that's the scary part.
That
right.
is, yeah.
So having some kind of a plan, whether that's like, in some cases people just build like a panic room where they can go in. I don't think that's really a realistic scenario for like 90% of people.
Yeah.
So having some kind of a plan of how you're going to do that. And I think the best thing to do is just start with like a basic home security audit, right? Like, what are the highest risk likelihood things that are going to happen? And then how could you defend yourself against that? It could be as simple as like giving yourself like a locked bedroom at night.
Right.
Right. And maybe having something to shield yourself with, to be able to contact the authorities if you have the ability. Now, if you live, way out in the bush somewhere, the travel time that might not even be available for you.
Yeah.
Right. So then you have to have a totally different plan.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't think there's one size fits all solution. It's definitely going to be tailored to the person's individual circumstances, where they live, how old they are, what their physical fitness level is, all that stuff. But whatever it is, even if you are, like a 90-year-old person and you're listening to this right now, awesome. Thank you. This is cool, but you should still do some kind of a home security audit. Like, how are you likely to have some risk to your bodily safety?
Yep.
Right. And so that's not really something I can get into specific solves for everything. That's not an expert. I think we can bring on experts to deal with that.
A couple experts that we'll bring on for some interviews and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I'm not like a fighter.
Yeah. Former and current military that train people how to, clear rooms, how to assess safety situations.
Yeah.
So the one thing that I realized probably 4 or 5 years ago was when my wife asked me, she's like, do you have a plan if someone breaks into the house?
Mm.
And I was like, yeah, I've thought the whole thing out 30 ways to Sunday. And so I went into it and I said, so you go grab the kids from this room, you stay on this side of the stairway, I'll defend the stairway. There's no way they can get into here. Well, like, so I had this whole thing and she's like, that might've been nice to know. So if you're listening to this and you're a guy or gal and you've got a plan, have you told everyone else do they know what to do?
Yeah.
Because the last thing you want to do in a situation where someone's entering your home is to be barking orders out loud and giving anyone any clue of what's going on.
Yeah.
So if you don't have a plan, make one.
Yeah.
If you don't know how to make a plan, go look it up on the there's so many resources for everything. And share and practice.
Yeah.
Right. Like, talk it through with your family and let them know what's going to be happening, who's in charge of what, who's making the phone call, how are you defending your home, in what way, right?
Exactly.
Where you're going to defend your home from. And we'll bring
it helps if your family is on board and they know, what the plan is.
Yeah. If you have a little Timmy running around screaming his head off, running back up and down the hallway, well, that doesn't help. Right?
No, Timmy needs to know what his role is.
Timmy needs to know the plan.
Yeah. Timmy, go lock the door. Go in this place. Call the police.
Call the police. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever that is. And we're laughing about it. But it's, this should be taken very seriously.
I think there's actually a good idea to just lay out the steps for people. I think a lot of people know this, but there might be some people listening who don't. So level 1 is form a plan.
Yep.
If you haven't had one, as you said. But the next level is like, if you have a plan, make sure you share that plan so everyone knows it.
Yep.
Like you said. And then the next level beyond that is practice the plan.
Yep.
So it's like one thing to have a verbal agreement about what the plan is, but if you haven't practiced it, like just hearing about something and actually doing it are two very different things. And when you're in the moment, you don't want to be like, all right, this is the first time we're trying it and the stakes are we all die.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't do that.
Probably don't want to do that. So practice. And then beyond that, you could actually go to like the improving the plan, right? So you take what you learned from the practice and then improve it in future practices.
Yes.
That's probably like as good of a level as you probably need to get to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's one thing that you should be thinking about when it comes to sovereign defense is how are you going to defend your family? How are you going to defend yourself if you wake up in the middle of the night and someone has come into your home? I have a dear friend who's gone through that situation and it's absolutely terrifying. So be prepared and communicate what that plan is. Another thing that I know got drilled into us when we're kids of the 80s. We got drilled into us the fire escape plan, fire drills in your home. So I would love to hear from the people in the comments. Is this something do you remember this, or is it still being pushed in your circles? And do you have one? Have you thought, oh, I know I need to have one, but I don't have one. So write down in the comments where you're at with your fire plan. Do you have a basic map in your home of where people are going to go? Do your kids know where they're going to go? Do they know what they do when they smell smoke? So all of those things, I mean, that's pretty important. So
yeah, it's defending your relationships, defending your children, all of those things from the risk of fire. The other thing too is you can also have that plan of like, what's the line of what do you fight versus, flee from?
Yes.
Right. So if you don't have the tools to fight fires, even a small fire can take out your entire house.
Yep.
One thing I did in the last couple of years was I put fire extinguishers of different types for different types of fires in appropriate places, spread throughout the house. So I don't have one fire extinguisher. I think I have like 7.
Smart.
And I also have fire blankets that you can throw on top. So let's say you use your fire extinguisher and it gets like 90% of it. And then you're like, oh no, I can't, it's still going. Okay, then throw the fire blanket on top of it.
Yeah.
Obviously, only if you're a trained firefighter, you're going to actually be able to really be effective. And if it is a threat to your safety, then you just need to get out. Like if you wake up and the whole house is burning and it's full of smoke, then you need to get the hell out of it.
Yeah.
But if it's just like a small kitchen fire, you're not going to be like, abandon the house, right?
Chances are if you wake up in the middle of the night and there's smoke everywhere, the number one priority is get your family out of the house.
Yeah, 100%.
Get your family out of the house. If it makes sense, get the pets out of the house and then look at, okay, what is going on here? Can I do anything about it? Obviously, you have someone who is going to be calling for emergency services. So those can come on the way if those are available to you.
Yeah.
Get your family out.
Yeah.
Number one thing.
Yeah, 100%.
Get your spouse out, get your babies out, think about the pets if it's possible, but don't put anybody at risk.
Absolutely not. Yeah. So it's a combination, I think, of don't put people at risk. That's priority number 1. And then if people aren't at risk, right? Like if a fire in your frying pan starts up and it's starting to spread a little bit and you're awake and you're watching that, I think if you have the tools right there, you can put that up right there.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have to evacuate everyone from the house for that. But if you wake up in the middle of the night, smoke's filled with the house, so you're like, that's a dangerous situation. You got to get out. So you can also, there's a lot of materials online of best practices for fire plans, but yeah, fire plans, home security audit, like those are the first 2, I think, for like your body's defense and your family's defense and your children's defense.
Yes.
Another point which would be your mental defense. So sovereign mind.
Yes.
So doing another type of audit where you kind of look at, okay, what are my own mental vulnerabilities? And that one is really tricky. So if you feel like you can't accurately figure out what your own mental vulnerabilities are, that's okay. A lot of people can't. So you can ask close friends, be like, hey, if you're going to try to manipulate me or attack me for some reason, how would you do it? Right. And then get them to be like the red team and red team and computer lingo is like the hacking team, the one that's trying to do the assault.
Yeah.
So you can get people that know you and know how you think to like red team you.
No, this is cool because we do this at some of the masterminds and seminars I go to for sales psychology is you literally sit across from someone and you just rip them apart. You rip their business apart, their product, their offering, you probe for all those vulnerabilities. And then we build up, mental strength on any entrepreneur out there has heard 100 no's to every yes.
Yeah.
And so no's they're not even a thing. But so I like what you're saying. And I've never thought about it in that paradigm, like have someone close to you who is not an abuser. If they're an abuser, this is a non-conversation. Someone close to you that you trust, that you have an intimate relationship with. Like they know a lot about you. One of those, if you remember our Sovereign Relationships podcast episode, we had, you probably have 5 intimate relationships if you're lucky nowadays.
Yeah.
So again, let's improve that. But have one of those people go at you and try to attack you on your vulnerabilities and just
Exactly.
And then what happens next? Like,
so once they run the analysis, right, they try to attack you, they try to find weaknesses, then it's almost like, I'm drawing a lot of analogies from computer attacks.
Okay.
So once you try to find the vulnerabilities and you do, then the next step is figuring out how you can block them. Basically, how can you patch those security vulnerabilities and defend against them?
Right.
So you don't know what to patch until you know what the vulnerabilities are. So obviously you got to do that first.
Yep.
And then once you do, then you can work out strategies to maybe do exercises to increase your mental toughness, or maybe you found out like, oh, I'm a really gullible person.
Yes.
Okay, so dig into why that is, and then try to figure out, okay, what would be strategies to defend against my natural tendency to be gullible?
Yeah. So now you're talking about like deep work and shadow work,
Yeah.
and that's a whole conversation in and of itself. But I really like this is a tool that I've never thought of to highlight the things that agitate you, make you, especially if you feel fear or shame, you're wide open to being manipulated by a person. Right. If someone can make you afraid of something or you feel shame, it's like, I don't want to feel that. I can't feel that. And instead of sitting in it and going, why am I feeling this?
Yeah. Just take this pill and you'll feel all better now.
The brain wants a fix. Get me out of this.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really neat one. I like that.
Yeah. So I think the toughness, obviously, but in general too, critical thinking, we've talked about multiple times on multiple episodes. That's a huge one. If you haven't developed your critical thinking skills, that's probably your best like baseline defense for your mind. Because if you just let in ideas with no real critical thinking about it, anything can really penetrate those defenses. And the mind is where it can get pretty bad because it can spread into other areas of your life pretty rapidly.
Yeah.
So if some sort of attack vector gets planted in your mind, you can then start doing behaviors or making choices that open up other attack vectors.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people underestimate just how open they are. Like when they try to do attacks on computer networks, usually the weakest person in that whole defense is the person.
Yeah.
It's the minds of the people that are the easiest to break in any security system.
Yeah. I've got an example. So growing up, I've always tried to find the easiest way to do the most amount of stuff with the least amount of effort. It's just how my brain's wired. I don't like doing something a traditional way if I can find a better way to do it. So I'm always iterating, experimenting. I didn't know that was a superpower in the way that I apply it in life now. And I was called lazy a lot. I would be called lazy by my parents when they were upset with me. I'd be called lazy by teachers. I'd be called lazy by my coaches in sports. And then I got into the workplace. Right. I don't make a very good employee the way that I'm built. And so I'd be called lazy by bosses. I'd be called lazy by coworkers. And I let that in. Like I let that sink into my psychology and be like, maybe that's just what I am. And then when I found the things I was passionate about, that I love, that resonated with my soul, I was like, I'm a workhorse.
Yeah.
And then I looked back at my whole life when I started saying, I am a workhorse. I can do anything. I am not lazy.
Yeah.
I look back at my whole life and look at all the things I accomplished while I allowed that mind virus to penetrate my psychology.
Yeah. There's actually an interesting thing on top of that. I think probably many people have read this study where they said the people who are lazy, like branded lazy, are actually the people who push society forward because they invent new ways to get things done better. So imagine someone's like, hey, you you crafted that stick with that metal thing to shovel the ground. Why aren't you using your hands, you lazy person?
Get back to work.
Right?
Right?
Do it the slow, painful, boring way. Yeah. So the lazy person naturally shortcuts and finds ways to achieve objectives with less energy expended, which is actually like an advantage, because the less energy you expend, the more you can,
the more you can accomplish with the same amount of energy.
Exactly.
Yeah. So don't let people define you. Don't let people attack you. Don't let these mind viruses in.
Yeah.
The same as all the news agencies out there. Again, like I've said this before, they're trying to convince us that humanity is this one big steaming pile of shit and everybody is so horrible, wars and famine. And, almost all people are amazing, good, kind-hearted people.
Yeah. The only reason they do that is because that's how they pay the bills.
It's how it pays the bills, right? Fear for clicks, shame for clicks. Yeah. So defend your mind. That's a big one.
Yeah. So next one, I think, like if we think about children, I think that's a huge one. Mm-hmm. Defending your kids is any parent's top of mind. There's actually a lot of interesting and small things you can do that can help. It obviously depends a lot on how old they are, because if they're like 6 months old versus like 16 years old, very wildly different capacities. Yes. But let's say they're even old enough to talk. So maybe they're 6 or 7 or maybe even 5 in some cases, where they can know what's going on. You can set up a passphrase system with them. So if they're ever in a situation where they feel unsafe or they're not sure what's going on, but they don't want to alert the person they're with. Yeah. Like they could be over at a friend's house and maybe they want to come home because they don't feel safe, but they don't want to say that they want to come home. So they can use
They don't want to be embarrassed or shamed or
exactly. Yeah. So that's one way to protect them. And you also don't know what might be going on in that home. Yes. Right. So they might want to keep it on the DL or, just not talk about it, but they need a way to let you know. Yeah. So that's where passphrases can be super useful, where you can set up, you can have like a single word, you could say like pickles, for example, could be the passphrase. Yeah. But those could also be learned and then hijacked and exploited. So another way, if you want to make it a little bit more complicated, is you can change the password based on the time. So the password could be a special password for that month. Right. Or like a combination of different variables. Right. Obviously, a 6-year-old isn't going to be able to do this. No. But like a teenager could, right? Or a 12-year-old could. You could say like, okay, in December, the password is pancakes. Right. Right. And then as long as you can remember what month it is, you're okay.
Andrew, this is another beautiful one. I really like this. If you're listening, do you do something like this? Because I don't. My kids my oldest kid is 6, but it's just at that time where they might be going and hanging out in different social situations and starting to have those sort of things happen. But that makes a lot of sense. Imagine your kid over at someone's house and there's a dangerous thing going on, like dangerous. Mm-hmm. And they've been told like not to tell anyone, or their mommy and daddy will get hurt if they share with anyone, but they need to get out of that situation. That's just one example. Yeah. The less extreme example is like, I don't want to be here. I'm scared. I don't want to spend the night at my friend's house, but I don't want to get made fun of at school the next day. They say pickles, and you're like, oh, you know what?
You have to come home. You have
to come home. Sorry. You make yourself be the bad guy. Yeah.
Throw yourself under the bus.
Yeah, this is wonderful. Yeah, parents are meanies anyway, so that would come of no surprise. Yeah. So yeah, that's a beautiful one.
Or we can think up an excuse like, oh no, there's actually something in the morning tomorrow that's happening. I have to take my kid to. So I'm so sorry about that.
Doctor's appointment in the morning. I forgot.
Yeah.
Cancel.
A million excuses.
Yeah, we're out of here.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one thing. Obviously protecting them when they're online. So setting up layers of defense there. Yeah. Firstly, you should not be really posting their faces publicly, because that can be, especially with like geotags and photos, that's like a huge no-no. Yeah. Try to avoid that wherever possible, to as the smallest group as possible. Yeah. So if you do really want to share with friends and family online, try to keep it to a smaller group where possible. Don't put it way out there. Now, if you do have like a kid where you're like, hey, we're going to turn them into a YouTube star, opening toy boxes, that's one thing that you then have to have an entire security plan around if you're going to do that. Yeah. So do that, carefully and thoughtfully. And then I think the next one is teaching them about physical defense, right? So first of all, if like someone is entering their physical space? What are they allowed to do? And if someone is like kidnapping them, well, we've probably told them, don't hit, don't do this. So they might think, oh, I can't hit this person.
Yeah.
But then you're like, no. If you're being kidnapped, like gouge their eyes out, do whatever you need to do to get away.
Yeah.
I had to have this talk with my son too. Be like, okay, there's times where it's appropriate to use violence, and there's times that aren't. And here's where you could.
Yeah.
And then here's all the areas you're not able to do that.
Yeah.
It might be obvious to us because we're adults, but you have to remember that the kids don't know that.
They don't know that. No. And again, it's like, there's so much to teach a child. It blows the mind. You're like, I'm going to miss so much of what they need to know to go out and survive in this world. But yeah. And these might be uncomfortable conversations, but they need to be had. They need to happen.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So anyway, and that's really just scratching the surface, because there's a million other ways kids can get themselves into trouble.
Yeah. The other one I want to bring up before we move on to our final point would be defending your time.
Yeah, let's do it.
Defending your time. We touched on this on our second episode, but you really have to defend yourself from people stealing your time, from you carelessly letting your time go. So
every notification is an attempt at taking your time from you.
Yes. I mean, these insidious little cell phones and digital devices going, hey, attention.
Yeah.
Look at this. Imagine it's turning you into like this ADD brain person where you're deep into a thought process or a conversation, or you're participating in something where you're adding value to yourself, your family, or another, and there's an interruption. Well, that flow of adding value is gone. Mm-hmm. You're off in the toolies looking at whatever that notification was. So defend your time. So when you're having this bleeds into sovereign relationships. When you're in partaking of sovereign relationships, having communications, discussions, sharing intimate things about your life, and you're getting interrupted, like defend that time from your devices.
Yeah.
Keep that safe.
Yeah. And also any person who's, reaching out to you with an email or whatever, they're like asking you, give me your time.
Yes.
I don't know if you've ever, like, let's say you wake up, you do your morning routine, you're like, okay, time to check my messages. And then you had like this whole idea of how your day was going to go. And you're like, okay, I'm going to do this. And then this flood of demands on your time starts coming in.
Yes.
And so if you don't filter that out and you don't defend your time, you need to be like, okay, this is important and urgent. I should do it.
Yep.
This is not important. It's not urgent. Let's shelve that. I don't want to deal with that right now. Some people will just deal with everything and they don't apply labels to, whether they should deal with this or not. And you have to remember that just because someone messaged you, you have the choice not to reply.
Yes.
You don't have to reply back.
Yeah.
So when they extend an invitation for you to spend time on them, you are not obligated to actually give them your time.
Yes. Now
you can block them.
No,
you don't have to, but
let's go a little deeper on people and time.
Yeah.
We touched on this also in the second episode, but you do have to defend your time from people who are taking it from you. You do have to decide how much time you're going to spend with certain people and see if the time that you're spending with them is aligning with the goals that you have.
Yeah.
Right. You really have to decide, the top 5 people you spend all your time with, you're going to gravitate towards talking like them, thinking like them, acting out like them. You're going to be as successful as them. So really think about that and look for the people who are those energy or time vampires who are constantly demanding of your time, constantly taking from you.
Yeah. And if anyone who's watching this, if you've felt any of that, like, we'd love to hear how your thoughts are on those relationships, as well as maybe any of the other points we've talked about, because this could be a pretty interesting conversation around like what also any of the points we've talked about. Do you guys have any other ideas about defense points that we might have not talked about, but you think are really important?
What do you want to hear about? And we can touch on those topics or bring on some guests and go deep on them. So let us know what your interests are in the comments.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
So one of my favorites, Andrew, is food.
Yeah.
And the defense of
your
food
too.
Supply. I love food. Yeah.
I tend not to like it when I don't have food.
Yeah, that gets a little uncomfortable. So I love to talk about families having a 30-day food and water supply. And we're not talking about being a prepper here. I mean, everyone's like, oh, storing food, must be a prepper. That, unfortunately, the whole prepper thing has taken people right out of the conversation. And there's this beautiful medium right in the middle that every family should be doing, is having 30 days worth of food and water in your home for each member of your family. Now, why? Right? And you think about it, like, there's only a couple days worth of food at your grocery store, right? In the entire city, there's maybe 3 days worth of food. And if there's a panic, there's less than a day.
Mhm.
And so defending your food supply is so critical. It's on the very bottom, food and water on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And
Which doesn't mean, by the way, for those who don't know, that doesn't mean it's not important because it's on the bottom. It means it's a base level need that everyone needs.
Foundational.
Yes.
And we'll splash a little icon up of that pyramid of needs on the screen for you. If you're watching this on YouTube, that is so critical to handle because it encompasses almost every emergency that's going to come up short of the crazy ones. And if the big crazy ones happen, you got bigger problems to think about.
Yeah.
But defend your food supply, right? You can't expect to go to the grocery store with a spear and a net and try to catch some food in a crisis. I mean, we've just, with the supply chains and the way we've built the world up, we were very, very vulnerable to being able to feed our families. And
defense of your food supply doesn't actually mean like you have to go buy like a 50 cal rifle and like, you know, target practice to make sure you're like, yeah, I'm going to defend my food. You can defend it in so many other ways. Like passive defense is people just don't know you have it.
Yes.
Another one is if they try to search your house for it, it's in a place where it's almost impossible to find.
Yeah.
But it's still accessible to you, right? So you don't have to like automatically go to the physical violence side of it. It can be passive ways to just make sure that, you know, your food supply doesn't get taken from you from someone who didn't create a food supply.
Yes, exactly. I think for, you know, defense of your sovereign food supply, one of the most important things I try to share this with everyone is don't tell anybody. The first rule to Food Club is we don't talk about Food Club, right? Just don't tell anyone. Have your 30 days.
We're violating that rule here.
we are, as we've said before. Our job is to spread the message and to help more people and families by sharing things they should be doing.
Yeah.
But don't tell anybody about your food supply. It's just your own family's little thing that you do. Right.
Yeah.
Make sure your kids know that as well. It's not something you go to school about and brag about and
my daddy has 6 years worth of food supply.
And then everyone's writing that down going, okay, the address is, So
where do you live again?
Yeah. Where do you live again? Yeah.
And what's the best food you have there?
Yeah.
Are there like snacks or are we just talking like,
do you have coffee? Like what, like what's on the menu?
Yeah, exactly.
So defend that supply from other people knowing about it or where it's stored. That's your own personal thing.
I'd like to add one final point after the food, and that is that you also need to defend your defense.
Okay.
Which is kind of meta and kind of strange to think about because you'd think, oh, well, the only one that's not defense is the defense one.
Okay, break it down for us.
But if you actually think about this is like the suddenly clear Clarence meme. So when people try to convince you that you don't actually have to have the ability to defend yourself, that actually harms you and actually causes you to be more open to attack on all of the other fronts.
Okay.
So you actually have to defend your mentality of defense. Meaning, if someone's like, hey, you know what? You don't really need to do that. You'll be fine. But you could easily do it, right? Like, you don't need to get a 30-day food and water supply. The grocery store always has food.
Yeah.
Well, we haven't had any major problems. We've just had a couple minor issues, and I've been to the grocery stores and they're bare.
And these were minor issues we experienced.
We had like a flooding that happened one time, and then the food supply got cut off from the trucks because the highways washed out and like no food. And you're like, well, thank God I have some food in the house.
Yeah.
Or, you know, the toilet paper crisis of 2020.
How did that happen?
Yeah, exactly. So
let me just cut in there. Like I will find a towel, a cloth, or an old shirt. I would prefer to have food than toilet paper. So people, stop buying up all the toilet paper.
Yeah, and don't panic by it too, right?
I'd rather have the ability to have stuff wanting to come out of my body than to have nothing coming out, but have everything to clean up the mess.
Yeah, because you can't eat toilet paper.
Well,
if you do, really desperate.
You're not doing good.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's one example, but there it applies in every other area, right? So someone's like, "Oh, you don't need to defend yourself against your mind being hijacked."
Yeah.
Well, yes, you do. There's people that want to influence you to do things to either just even buy their products or their services.
Yeah.
There's huge incentive to
Don't
do
waste
that.
your time securing your passwords. Don't waste your time securing your, your money. Right? Don't waste your time securing all of these things. Like,
Yeah.
there's so many people out there that will tell you that's a waste of time.
Yeah.
And here's what I say. That's a waste of time for you. But this makes me feel good. This makes me feel safe. And my job is to protect my family.
Yeah. And then also look at what they're doing too. Maybe they might even be telling you that, but they do something different because it might be in their best interest to get you to go down that road.
Yeah. You never know. So again, critically think. And I like that. Defend your defense.
Yeah. Defend your defense.
Keep that defense up.
Just don't go overboard.
Yes.
That's the dangerous thing where it always gets kind of like made fun of and becomes a meme because people take it to the nth degree. They're like, hey, let's zombie apocalypseify my house with like metal shutters and like built-in flamethrowers with like a tank of propane gas underneath my house so I can just flame the zombies even when the gas goes off during the apocalypse. Like that's too much, right? Look at the most likely scenarios. What's plausible? You're not going to be able to defend yourself against like, let's say an Apache helicopter wants to come take your house out. Guess what? It's happening.
Yeah. Now, inside of that, if someone wants to make a hobby out of one of the defenses and that hobby becomes a passion and that becomes a business and you're sharing with other people, do it.
Sure. Yeah. Like, that makes sense. If you're
want,
passionate about like archery, for example, that's totally fine.
Or if you want to go beyond a 30-day food supply and be a prepper, amazing, right? Like that there's nothing wrong with that. Have fun with it.
Yes.
You won't be able to go all out with everything because again, you get back to your sovereign time.
Exactly.
How much time do you have to spend on things while participating in this whole system that has been designed for us to work within?
Yeah. And I think you touched on that point nicely. And I think how I'd say it is, don't do something out of fear, because you said do something if you're passionate about it. And it's like, yes, exactly. So if you want to go down like an archery path for fun because you enjoy it and you're not doing it because you're scared that the world's going to end and you need to be like that guy in Walking Dead who had like the
crossbow.
Yeah. Right. So if you're like, oh, I have to be able to be like him to be able to survive the zombie apocalypse, that's not the right way to do it. Do it because you have fun with it.
Yeah.
But not because you're scared that you have to have this ability.
And if the world becomes unfun and you can shoot an apple off of a person's head at 300 meters away with your crossbow, well, hey, you've got a skill that other people are going to want. You're going to be popular in your community, your survival community.
Yeah, exactly.
So, have fun with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's a pretty well-rounded approach to sovereign defense, is that it's not like go crazy, but there is value to it and it has to be talked about. It's a really important topic.
Yes.
And it's so broad. It connects to every single point. There isn't a single point that it doesn't connect to.
All right. So that brings us to the end of our sovereign defense episode. Coming up next will be our sovereign citizen episode. We're looking forward to that. If you've been enjoying what we've been teaching and sharing with you, please tag 5 friends who would love this content. Share it with them, get them on board. We'd love to help more people. Follow us on our socials, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, all that sort of stuff. Like, subscribe, follow along so we can bring you more amazing content.
Woohoo! Yeah, that sounds great.
All right. Stay sovereign, my friends.
Bye-bye, guys.